Good evening, and welcome to the latest episode of Caucus. I'm Bree Oatman from Pierre, South Dakota, and I'm joined with Amanda Bachman, my partner in crime for this show. And we have a special guest tonight. We have Susan Kroger with us, who is with the organization Lead South Dakota. And so we're going to give her the floor and let her talk about what that organization is trying to accomplish in their state. And then we're going to dive into some the latest and greatest legislative drama happening here in Pierre. So Susan, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate it. If you don't mind, I'll tell you guys a little bit about the background of Lead, just how it came to be. Amanda's heard this a million times. I am Susan Kroger. I live and work in Sioux Falls. I am the co-founder of Lead South Dakota. Lead South Dakota is a grassroots organization that was formed after the election in 2016. I'm sure you remember everyone was so hopeful that we were going to have our first woman president, and obviously that didn't happen. And we saw a few things, like women feeling really upset about the outcome of that election, but then also lots of organic organizing that was happening online in the form of Facebook groups. I'm pretty sure, isn't that how South Dakota Forward got your start? You were the Pantsuit Nation South Dakota chapter.
Yep.
And so there are literally thousands of women saying, holy crap. And so I, at the time, was working on my PhD in social movements and really wanted to understand this better. So I did a lot of research on how do people become engaged in these online movements, and then what do we do with people who are interested in being a part of it. And so Lead was born over happy hour drinks with a few of my friends who have been working in progressive politics in South Dakota for a long time. And it's really tiring. And as you guys know, and we wanted to have a bit of a more formal infrastructure to do this work. So we established Lead. It really started with the premise of getting more women involved in politics, and has really evolved since then to really anyone who cares about progressive issues. I would say our membership is comprised mostly of women. We're much more active on the eastern side of the state than anywhere else, though I would love to see that change. We're a 501c4 designation, which means that we can do direct candidate work, we can support candidates, and we can do unlimited lobbying on issues. So I just got back from Pierre tonight, working on the mask mandate, which I know we'll discuss shortly. And we like spending time in Pierre, working on various issues that matter to our membership, particularly stepping in on issues where other organizations maybe aren't, able to provide cover. So we're probably best known for our candidate recruitment work. So the last few cycles, we've had a class called our Campfire Candidate class, and we've been able to recruit right around 15 candidates for each one of those. So we have first-time candidates go through a 6-month training program with us, where they learn how to run for office, how to raise money for office, how to execute an effective field campaign, etc. And so some familiar names from that. Linda Dubo was part of that, Representative Aaron Healy, former Representative Kelly Sullivan, candidates from this last cycle like Aaron Royer, Jessica Myers, Louise Snodgrass and Brookings was in that. And so helping them feel prepared and ready to run, and also feeling like they're not alone in this, because running for office is a really big, scary thing. And when you feel like you're doing it completely alone, that can be terrifying. So anyway, that's a little bit about us. You can find our website, leadsouthdakota.org. We're on Instagram, Facebook, all the good things.
Yeah, so Susan, with the candidate, that 6-month candidate training, I know I've seen a bunch of folks who, based on like certain things that are happening in the legislature right now, are talking about like that they are already making the decision that they want to run in 2022. Are you guys going to be, when's like the next cycle that potential candidates can get in on that training?
Yeah, I saw a few of those types of announcements today too. I was super excited. So the first thing I always do, if you have already decided you want to run for office, you should talk to your party. I know that we're talking to Democrats here this evening. So if you're going to run for office, you should talk to the Democratic Party, whether it's your county party, whether it's your, your district, kind of whatever it looks like in your part of the state in terms of who's a leader in the party. Let them know, because it's going to save them a lot of time and headache to try to recruit new candidates. And then also let the state party know as well. But then beyond that, shoot me a message. We'll start the new candidate cohort. It will be in January of next year. So we run the cohort January through July, and it's a once a month meeting. It will happen completely on Zoom. We bring in different topic experts to discuss, like I said, fundraising, to discuss just simple things like, how do I file to be a candidate? How do I ask people for money? What kinds of mailers should I be sending out? How do I decide what universe to send it to? All of those things. We can kind of walk you through some of those basic skills. And then we wrap up in July, so you have plenty of time to get out there and knock doors, which is absolutely critical to win as a Democrat in South Dakota. So basically, send me a message on Facebook.
Yeah.
Let me know if you're interested.
Yeah, and I'm so Hughes County District 24, so I'm the Hughes County chair. So yeah, if any folks in District 24 are already thinking that they want to take a crack at 2022, like, reach out. Let us know. Or more immediately, we've got a Pierce City Commission race election in June. So have you guys worked with any municipal candidates, or has it all been legislative?
No, we've worked with some municipal candidates. So, I mean, municipal races are a different beast. And so I think we're still kind of getting the hang of that. My experience and most of my board has more experience in legislative races, truth be told. But we have had city council and mayoral candidates go through the training, and I think they found it helpful. Obviously, city races, I know in Sioux Falls anyway, are on a very different timeline than the legislative races, and so that training has to be kind of condensed and done more quickly. But yeah, happy to again have those conversations with people, because even though they're a little bit different in how they're run and maybe how you would promote yourself as a candidate, an election is an election is an election. So still a lot of those same skills that we know work in legislative races absolutely apply to city council, county commission, and school board races too. We've been helpful with a healthy handful of people who have been successfully elected to school board in the last few years, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I was, as you were talking about like the start of LEAD, I was, like remembering that like November, December, like January of like 2016 into 2017. And we had met on the internet before well before we met in person. And I think the first time we actually met in person was in like a random gate in O'Hare because like we were both going through.
I remember that. Yeah.
I forget. I think I was heading out from South Dakota and you were heading back. And yeah, so I do love how South Dakota politics is like one giant small town, and it was great in non-COVID times being able to participate in some of the LEAD activities in person. And I know when things get back to some sort of normal where we're not going to kill each other if we hang out in person, that I look forward to seeing you guys all again.
Yes, absolutely. Same here. I forgot that's how we met.
Yeah. I was like sending each other messages like, I think I'm at gate G. Oh man, yeah. Early travel in South Dakota. So you talked about the mask requirement issue that you were here in Pierre for, and I saw that there was a Senate bill that had dropped around this issue. So what's the deal with NESBA's Senate bill?
Yeah. So again, I'd love to give a little background before I throw all the talking points out. So I do politics pretty much 24/7. So my full-time job is a programs manager for a large foundation that focuses on helping progressive organizations in rural spaces across the country. And as part of that work, I've been really lucky to have access to quite a bit of data and people who are really, really much more Facebook savvy than I am, to help them understand like what do South Dakotans care about, and what is it that South Dakotans would like to see the legislature do, and particularly related to COVID, how does South Dakota want to manage a pandemic in a state where we have a lot of rural people who are at high risk because we have an aging population, and we have a ton of people who work for healthcare providers, right? And so they know that public health is important. And so what we found, you probably won't be surprised, is like when we did a lot of Facebook polling, essentially, is that people didn't support shutting businesses down. That's something that I think we know across the board hasn't been particularly popular in South Dakota, but what we have seen is, by and large, people support a mask requirement, especially in public places. So this is something that South Dakotans see as a very small gesture. They see it as a way that they can maintain community, and they see it as something that is protective. And so I actually approached Senator Ness about bringing this bill. I felt it was very important for us to do so for several reasons. One is that, as we know, South Dakota has been hit really hard by this pandemic. There are times when we were the, number one, infection rate in the nation. We as a state have lost more people than the entire country of Australia. We've seen the effects. I've lost 3 family members to COVID. It's really awful and sad. And these are all people who mean something to someone, right? And we're a pro-family state, right? And so what's going on here? Why are we not doing anything about this? And so that obviously is the most important reason. But honestly, the other reason is when I think about when we have all these conversations about how do Democrats build power in South Dakota, how do Democrats build their brand in South Dakota? In my mind, it is organizing around issues like this, issues that are enormously popular across party lines. We're seeing popularity, with Republicans as well with this issue. I love that your cat is. And so when we think about how do we build power, instead of just always talking about like, oh, we need to change the image of the party. No, we don't need to change the image of the party. What we need to do is meet people where they're at and have conversations that actually resonate with them. And so this is an example. I thought, okay, we have this super condensed session and it's always chaos, but I think it's really important to bring forward a bill like this to let South Dakotans know that we're actually interested in doing work for them. And not only can we just bring the bill and hope people pay attention, we need to blow this up. This is a campaign, right? And so we have a campaign attached to this bill, which I'm really excited about, and has already been successful. So, so the bill itself is a statewide mask requirement. It's SB 125. There is a petition in support of it that's being brought forward by a nonprofit that worked on the Sioux Falls mask mandate and was able to collect right around 1,500 signatures in just a few days for the Sioux Falls mask mandate. And so we're doing the same thing statewide. And so my big ask is sign the petition, share the petition with your friends and family. I think once you sign on, it takes 10 seconds to sign on. You can share it via Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and share it with people in the state who maybe don't even share the same political values as you, because you might be surprised. I talked to a lot of people who are really excited about the mask requirement and the fact that they feel like they're being heard for the first time. And so please share. And then when this is up in committee, which will be, I'm guessing, mid next week, by the time it's assigned and gets through, unless they really fast track it, we will bring the list forward. And we're not going to report individual names, but we will report a number of signers on this. Our goal is 5,000 signers. As of today, we have about 2,000, which is great. And so we want to keep pushing though over the weekend. So please help.
Yeah, I saw the link a couple times, so I will after this is over, I will definitely sign on to it. And one thing that's that I find interesting about the mask requirement, as somebody who at one point had a business and then had to close it because of COVID, having a mask requirement statewide really, I feel like it makes everything easier for businesses. There's just like this blanket expectation that's consistent across the state, across municipalities, that we're wearing masks in public places. And one thing that I noticed here in Pierre is like every time a mask requirement, the issue came up in like Brookings or Sioux Falls, or there was maybe some more like national press about it, I would notice like a slight uptick in the number of people who were wearing masks, down at Dakota Mart or whatever. And then, about a week or so later, it would, drop back to sort of baseline levels because, it wasn't in people's minds anymore. And then also like in Pierre, we don't have a mask requirement. And so businesses, the places that I'm still going have their employees are masked, but trying to find a business in Pierre where all the patrons are masked as well is tricky. Like I do Walmart pickup and go to Dakota Mart at really weird hours when there's nobody else there.
Totally.
And, we've gotten to the point in the pandemic where I feel like a little bit like I'm living in an alternate universe that outside of my friend group, I feel like I'm the only person in Pierre who's taking the pandemic seriously. Like when you go out in public, it's just very strange. So, especially with session.
Absolutely. Yeah. The Capitol was really interesting today. That's for sure. Yes. And to echo that, so we're seeing and hearing the same thing in Sioux Falls. Just anecdotally, when I am, picking up takeout from a business, et cetera, I went into a grocery store the other day and they had a sign on the door that said, the city of Sioux Falls has passed a mask requirement. We expect our patrons to comply. Thank you so much. And so, and we've heard personally, and we had many businesses testify to this. I also spoke with a business owner in Aberdeen today who said, please help us. Like, we are so tired of fighting with our patrons over this. We're just trying to stay open. And in order to stay open, our employees need to stay healthy. And so, like, this is a huge reason to do this. This is a very small business friendly, rural friendly bill. And so we're hearing it all over the place. Please do this. This is a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it should be so simple, and yet
it's not. Well, and honestly, and I can go on forever about this piece of it, and this is another reason. So, like, we sent out a press release about this today, and it was worded pretty strongly. And it's taking Noam to task on it because she has had every opportunity to introduce mitigating measures to help reduce the spread and to help save, selfishly, my family members, and she didn't do it. This is not an all or nothing thing, right? That's the argument she keeps making, is that we can't do anything because of personal freedom. And we're not asking for a shutdown. We are asking for people to wear a piece of fabric over their mouth and nose. Just like we ask people to wear seatbelts and not smoke in public places and all those sorts of things. This isn't hard. This isn't hard stuff.
Yeah. And generally wear shirts and shoes when you're in a public place. Like we require other clothing to be worn. Like
right, exactly.
A mask would be great. Yeah, and especially I was catching up on some of the reports about some of the new COVID mutations and the variants that are out there that are perhaps more easily transmissible. And it's so important now that when we've got the vaccine starting to roll out, that we are doing what we can to mitigate the rest of the spread. I've, been following along with the DOH calls and the data on their dashboard. And one of the most alarming statistics to me that I keep checking in on is the mortality rate for South Dakotans over the age of 50. Or another 50, over the age of 80. So if you're a South Dakotan you're over 80 and you get COVID, right now you have a 1 in 5 chance of dying. Like when I started tracking those odds, it was like 1 in 8, which is still terrible. Anything in risk communication, 1 out of 100 is considered high risk. So to have something with like a 1 in 5 chance of killing you, I'm like, okay, South Dakota legislature, like let's do something. And considering how lax the House side is with masks, I'm like, all right, who's going to be the next representative that goes down? They already, lost Glanzer in 2019 or 2020. And it's just baffling. And then all of the various like pro pro-birth, pro-family, just hitting those right-wing ALEC talking point bingo bills that are about like preserving the sanctity of life. Like, you don't care about the sanctity of life when somebody gets COVID.
Yep. Yeah. No. And they've so effectively politicized this bill, and I really do place so much of the blame on the governor and her approach to this. Not the Department of Health; they've been wonderful, but Governor Nome specifically in her lackadaisical approach has given other people permission to not take care of themselves. Right. So a big piece of this for me is my dad. He's 73. He's a cancer survivor. He is a former smoker, like all sorts of pre-existing conditions. And he's terrified of getting this. He's like, I know it's going to take me out if I get it. And I love my dad. He's a really good person, and I want him around to watch my kids grow up. And so this is personal, like on so many levels. I went to pick up takeout from Frying Pan the other day, and the place was packed full of people who were over the age of 70, not wearing masks. They are making these choices because this issue has been effectively politicized. Instead of seeing this issue as what it is, like any other public safety measure, like speed limits or seatbelts, they're seeing it as this Republican talking point, and Governor Nome has enabled that.
Yeah, we've talked about that on previous episodes that, you know, because she keeps kind of going to this, like, we're open, we're not going to lock down or whatever. It's like, well, hey, asking people to wear a mask is not the same as going into a lockdown. And if she, you know, like if she and, you know, she had just worn one from the first day, right? And then just always modeled that, we would be in a really different kind of situation right now in terms of that messaging. And I also believe if that had happened from the previous White House administration, that this would have been a completely different outcome too, to just have that behavior modeled on a regular basis. And yeah, so that's been one of my biggest frustrations too, in terms of the messaging. And then also just getting really cranky when then other bills pop up that are absolutely antithetical to personal freedom and civil liberties. I mean, it's just kind of the hypocrisy abounds in major ways in Pierre.
Yeah, it's really interesting to watch that politicization. Can't say that word. Of a lot of these issues, like obviously the transgender issue, et cetera, which I'm sure we'll talk about. I talked to this gentleman last night in Pierre when I was picking up. He is a self-described libertarian, and he calls himself socially, which I thought was really interesting. And so he said, I really struggle to understand the legislature because they are really hypocritical, right? Like they won't, like they'll attack the transgender community, and then they'll cry about personal freedom when we ask them to wear a mask. And he said, I really struggle with that. I don't know what to do with it. And then yet when he goes to the ballot box, he still votes straight party ticket. So I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. How do we do a better job of communicating out to those people?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, that's kind of the whole idea of how it saves lives. It's an act of love, protecting your neighbors. I mean, I don't know.
All right.
Yeah, so the so the mask requirement bill, once it gets assigned to committee, I'm assuming that everyone who signs the petition will probably be opted in for, you know, campaign updates as far as knowing like when to contact committee members and that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you sign up under the petition, we will follow up with action alerts. So once we know where it's going to be assigned. We have a feeling it's going to be assigned to Senate State Affairs. And so we're waiting to hear on that for sure, but that's what Senator Nespa thinks. And so once we know that, we'll be able to send out more information about it, communicating with those committee members and what one should communicate with them. We're also in the process of setting up testimony for that committee hearing and making sure that South Dakotans are heard in that room.
Yeah, I following along with House Bill 1076, the birth certificate bill, I saw that, folks that were opponents of the bill didn't get the link for the remote testimony. So that was a fun little snafu.
I've also heard that, so from a few sister organizations that they've been communicated to ahead of time and being told to only prepare for one or two people to give testimony as opponents to bills just because of time crunches. I've never seen that before. I've seen the 20-minute sure time limit in like education or health and human services who are seeing a million bills, sure. But to say you get one person, that's something that's new to me. And very concerning. Like, this is the democratic process. And a lot of times this is the way that I think particularly progressives are able to stop the spread of bigotry and hate in our state is through these committee hearings and making sure that people are heard. And so it's absolutely vital that we're able to continue doing that.
Yeah, and I did know. Go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, because, we need citizens to be able to testify because clearly we've only got 11 Democrats in the entire legislature. So as far as for some of these differing perspectives and voices to get heard, it's on the shoulders of everyday South Dakotans. And I know, at least with COVID, that's opened up some different ways to testify without having to be in peer. I think they used to always take like some phone testimony, but they're now using Microsoft Teams, and you have to, put your request in, 24 hours before the committee starts. And it's like, it would be great if they, made that sort of more accessible. But much like voting rights, it doesn't seem like the Republicans want to make it easier for anyone to participate in the process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you can give written testimony too. So that, and then, that goes to the general email for that committee, and supposedly copies are distributed then to the members of the committee. I'd like to know more about if that's actually happening. So I gave testimony that way for House Bill 1076 and also for the Senate Bill 68 this week. And I live in Pierre, but I was out of town when that happened, so I couldn't actually, and I would have physically gone to the rally in the morning for 1076 and then been there for that. Anyway, I gave the written testimony, but I'm not sure if it got to everybody. So I also then emailed all the members of the committee just for extra measure. So yeah, I think I'm hoping they continue to offer this as an option for people, because just trying to get to peer is such a barrier for people. And it certainly allows for more participation in the process versus paid lobbyists and, other people have the means to get there or can take time off from work and all those kinds of things. So there are some other COVID related bills. I don't think this is by any means an exhaustive list, but we can kind of continue this conversation about legislation related to kind of dealing with the pandemic. Let me find that slide. So there's some of these are great and some of them are kind of not so great. So there's a bill, House Bill 1097, which would change the language in our current laws about vaccination requirements, particularly pertaining to school. Because that law actually states the vaccines you're required to get to attend school in South Dakota. And interesting to note that COVID was not added to the list, which is actually appropriate at this point because the vaccine has not been approved for kids. They're still in the midst of doing trials with children under the age of 16, and that's even just like 12 years to 16. So it's going to be a while before this is approved for kids anyway. But what was interesting is, and I'm actually surprised that South Dakota didn't have this language in there already, because the current law states that you can object to getting a vaccine for religious beliefs, but it didn't include language related to philosophical beliefs, and that's what's being added to it. And so it's kind of interesting that South Dakota didn't already have that in there, considering how much they like to walk to the drum of freedom. And then the other ones related to COVID, there's a bill 1046, which is related to limited liability, basically saying that people can't be sued if somebody dies because of COVID or has major health issues because of COVID for whatever reasons, like unless you were somebody intentionally exposed to you. Like I got sick and then I went around purposely trying to get other people sick. It's the only way that I could be liable. And I thought that was kind of interesting, especially kind of considering all of I mean, in my mind, a lot of the lack of leadership that we were talking about earlier in terms of masks and everything else, and the part of the government certainly could be considered negligence. And so I get kind of irritated with bills like this, where, you know, it's like protecting people from being sued when they chose not to do things that protect other people at the same time. And then this one's kind of weird. So House Bill 1159 is related to bodily integrity, and this is a Phil Jensen bill. So just, you know, use that filter when you talk about it or think about it. So it's specifically the language, the gist of bodily integrity is that you have the right to refuse medical treatment. That's the gist of bodily integrity. But this bill is specifically related to COVID or contagious diseases and getting a vaccine. So it's a bill basically saying that nobody can be forced to be vaccinated for COVID, essentially, and cannot be discriminated against because they refuse the vaccine. So you can't lose your job. You can't be barred from school, barred from any kind of association or whatever because you choose not to get vaccinated, which I think is kind of interesting. Again, it's there seems to be this like kind of continuous, there's this culture in our legislature of creating bills to legislate for a problem that they like are paranoid that might happen, but then never really happens. And so it's just this like legislating a problem into an existence, which, you know, so I mean, it might get added to the school vaccine requirements, but then there's already already laws in place that allow students waivers from getting immunized. And as far as I know, like even educators aren't required to be vaccinated for things for employment. The only field I can think of that would be a requirement would be healthcare. And you would think that if you worked in healthcare, you'd want to be protected against all of the pathogens that you're exposed to. So anyway, that one's kind of interesting.
Can I jump in on that for just a second?
Yeah.
Sorry. So these anti-vaxxer bills, I mean, so this isn't something new in the South Dakota legislature, right? So like 1097 and 1159, the anti-vaxxers have from out of state have been coming in and attempting to stake a claim in South Dakota, just because we know that ultra-conservative bills can be passed here. And I know that vaccination thing can cut across party lines. I would say, as you're both scientists, right? As am I. Like we probably believe in the efficacy of vaccines. But so this isn't the first time. I think what's happening here is that they're seeing COVID as this opportunity, right, to kind of like the abortion laws, where they just like chip away at laws that uphold vaccine requirements and understand the concept of herd immunity and know that we don't want to get polio again. And so you see people like Sue Peterson in District 13 in Sioux Falls, who is an ardent anti-vaxxer, right? Although I think she tries to keep it cloaked to some degree. This will give her an opportunity, or that kind of ultra-conservative caucus an opportunity to bring forth some really ridiculous bills that in the past haven't been able to fly in the legislature, and because of COVID, now they will.
Yeah, and one thing that's I think kind of interesting about that bodily integrity bill that you mentioned, Bree, about like saying that you can't fire somebody for not getting a vaccine. South Dakota is a right to work state. You can fire somebody for whatever the hell you want. Like just make up another reason. So I'm not really sure what they think that is, that part of it is accomplishing. And the other sort of point on conservative groups using South Dakota as a testing ground for their legislation is that every bill that is submitted gets a hearing in committee. And that's a thing that's, kind of unique about South Dakota. And so people will they will throw their craziest spaghetti at the wall because they know it's guaranteed to get heard in committee, which is, farther than it can get in some other states. So that's why we're the guinea pigs.
Yeah. And then, and I think this gets back to that whole litigation and cost to taxpayers. What really irritates me about that is, one, there's just there's a lot of that legislation has just some massive violations, I think, of kind of separation of church and state, and this whole this agenda of the Christian nationalist agenda. I can't figure out why conservatives are anti-vaccine. Other than if they're part of believe, prayer and healing and no medical interventions whatsoever. It just seems like I have an easier time, kind of understanding how somebody who is more, because obviously like you said, Susan, the anti-vax kind of crowd is not politically conservative or liberal. They kind of span the spectrum of political ideology. And so I can, if they start using pseudoscience and they're kind of going at it, but they're also kind of these all about eating organic and all that kind of stuff. It's okay, I can kind of understand where they're coming from. And then I feel like I can kind of address it in terms of the science, the bad science behind it. But on the other end of the spectrum, I can't, I'm at a loss for what the issue is in the first place. And, what's interesting is Amanda and I brought this up a few weeks ago when we talked about the governor's COVID press conference actually, that was a month, that was in November. Wow, it was a long time ago. Anyway, we found the South Dakota State University had done a poll, and they actually saw that among evangelicals in South Dakota, that predominantly that people who identified as being evangelical were opposed to wearing masks and also tended to be opposed to being vaccinated. And so at that time, it struck me as well, that's going to be a huge problem for the governor, because she's, saying personal freedom, we don't need masks, they don't work anyway, but there's a vaccine coming. And so
everyone get vaccinated. She's the vaccine queen, right? That's
yeah. But has she actually? But now it seems like now that the vaccines are rolling out, until this week, I haven't seen her tweet or say anything about getting vaccinated. She hasn't said anything about her family. When is she going to get vaccinated? You know what I mean? All of a sudden, it's conspicuously quiet in terms of her messaging about vaccinations. Mm-hmm. And so I'm is she opposed? Is she going to get vaccinated? So it's just kind of interesting to me. I noticed that she's not saying a whole lot about vaccines.
So the media has asked her, and she has said she will get vaccinated, but she wants to wait for more vulnerable populations to be vaccinated first. But really, in my opinion, what's happening here is that she's riding on the coattails of really successful vaccine distribution plans on behalf of the major healthcare systems in the state. They did a really nice job. I don't speak for Sanford Health, let me be very clear, but I used to work for them. And I know a lot of the people who worked on that plan, and it's being executed really well, really effectively. And so that is not necessarily because of the vaccine queen. This is because healthcare systems are doing their jobs really well.
Yeah, there was actually an interview. I think that was yesterday. I heard an interview on the radio yesterday morning, I think, and it was about how our major health systems, so Vera, Monument, and Sanford, have come together to kind of collaborate and coordinate this effort, which is really unusual, right? They're competing markets, especially Vera and Sanford. And that they are working together to make this happen. Even the mass testing that happened in November was because of a private initiative funding that, and then having that public support of the National Guard to kind of implement it. But so she can't take credit for how great the rollout is when it's not because of her policies or leadership that's allowing for people to get vaccinated at this point.
Yeah. We've got about 20 minutes, so I think we should pivot, if you guys would like, to the House Bill 1076 and our general collective rage, the reason why I'm wearing my rainbow bison. And then the rainbow bison is also one of those things to come out of South Dakota. Like, I know the national media attention that South Dakota gets tends to paint the entire state with, it's all backwards, nothing good ever happens there. But the rainbow bison was like, it went South Dakota viral and became this symbol of, being an ally, being LGBTQ, two-spirit in South Dakota and supporting those communities. And it was it was a woman in Sioux Falls who I think like put it on Facebook, and it just got a life of its own. So, if this gets out beyond, a South Dakota audience, like there are people here working on these issues, like don't write off the entire state, because there's also people who are here and who can't leave here, and we need to stick around and do work that that supports them, that supports their freedom and ability to live their lives. And talking about personal freedom and the Republicans, Fred Deutsch in District 4 is just every year. My Facebook reminded me that last year around this time we had another anti-trans bill, and they just keep coming up. And this time it made it through House committee. Actually, no, it died in committee, and then it got smoked out on the House floor and then passed the House floor. So it's now been assigned to, I want to say it was assigned to a Senate committee, and will hopefully die in a Senate committee on Monday or Tuesday. But for folks playing along at home, I think this is the first time a sort of really headline bill got smoked out so early, and a lot of people learned that term. So a smoke out is when you've got a bill that died in committee. If there's enough support on the floor, they can essentially resurrect it from the dead and essentially force it to be heard in front of the full body. And so the House, Deutsch got 20, it was like a third of the House, got them to stand up and say they wanted to hear this bill, which that's also bullshit, because the smokeout, unless you're there to see it, you can't see who stands up to support the smokeout. And I want to know, I want to know who was standing. Might have to go back to the SDPB footage and see who it was. But it's not recorded the same way that, votes are up on the board for you to see. So yeah, the 1076 was smoked out. There was an hour of floor testimony. So for any Republicans who stumble across this, I hope you're happy that your party is spending, precious time in our very short legislative session to go on and on and on about how people shouldn't be able to update their birth certificates. My blood pressure went probably through the roof listening to that testimony. And it's another example of representatives trying to legislate about problems that really don't exist. I know a couple folks asked Fred how many times this happens in South Dakota as far as people wanting to amend their birth certificate, amend the sex designation on it. And I think the stats, it was 15 total in whatever sort of recent time period. And for a state with a population of 880,000, that's not statistically significant in any sense of the word. So yeah, that was the rage-inducing bill of the week. Just the fact that everyone was so happy that they managed to stop it in committee, and then that joy was so short-lived, because then that afternoon it got smoked out and then calendared for the next legislative day, which was Wednesday. So it was just heartbreaking to see so many organizations and so many allies, so many trans folks who were so happy that it died, and then for Deutsch to smoke it out. I hope he steps in all of the goose poo for the rest of session.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, and just so people know, that bill now is in the Senate chamber, and it will be. It was sent to the Senate Health and Human Services Committee, and I'm just checking for updates. That committee meets on Mondays and Wednesdays, and it is not currently on the agenda for Monday. It requires 24-hour notice, so it's not scheduled on the 1st. So it might show up next Wednesday. So I would say if you are wanting to get your written testimony in, or even just emailing members of that committee, you can go to the LRC website and find out who those people are and reach out to them. And then also, and just in terms of I know that I remember the ACL, Libby Scarin had she took a screenshot really quick when the monitor up in the chamber popped up with who had voted yay or nay. And obviously that list is now public too. But to immediately see who had voted in favor of the bill and who had not. And, it's just over 50% of the members of the House voted in favor. I think what was it, 39 to 31?
Yep, something 39 to 31.
Yeah. And so, and then I think what really just kind of made me super angry was just all of the, even Deutsch saying this isn't a hate bill. I'm not, and he'll throw the, I have Holocaust survivors in my family kind of stuff. I mean, there have been, I think this is now the 16th anti-transgender, anti-LGBTQ plus bill since 2016. I think that's what I saw, the latest numbers. And so, it's just like you said, Susan, it's exhausting, and it's, I'm a parent of a child who identifies as being part of that LGBTQ spectrum, and I just I fear for her safety every day, and it makes it really, really hard to live here and to feel like she's going to be okay and she's going to be safe. And and so that bill just I'm just about ready. And I don't even know what to do. I'm at a loss of words at this point, because other than just being really angry and not wanting to trying to filter my words very carefully. Just go total mama bear, mamasaurus on a bunch of people.
Yep. I feel all of those feelings as well. And to me, it's, so of course we could talk all day again about we can come back to the hypocrisy piece where let's talk about personal freedoms and how the Republican caucus holds those so dear unless you are, othered by them in some way, right? Whether you or a single mom trying to make a hard choice for herself, or a trans person who's trying to just survive and be okay in South Dakota. If you're one of those people, then no, personal freedoms don't actually apply to you. We don't believe that. So that's total hypocrisy. If we want to use Republican speak, and really use talking points that they're used to hearing. I have talked to, I've done advocacy in South Dakota for a decade, and I have talked to a really healthy handful of businesses who have been interested in coming to South Dakota because of the tax benefits of being a business here, and have refused to come because of the culture, and particularly because of the culture as put forth by our state legislature. And so just last year, I had a conversation with a gentleman who was interested in opening a branch of his business. He's based in St. Paul, wanted to open a branch in South Dakota, in Sioux Falls. And it would have been 20 really well-paying jobs, $60K plus paying jobs, which we desperately need here. We need better than $50 an hour in South Dakota. We absolutely do. And so this was a gentleman who was going to do that. That's an amazing opportunity for someone like me who has student loan debt, who is trained and an expert in a field. And I would love to be able to stay in my home. I would love to be able to stay here. And I can't because there are job opportunities. But he didn't want to come here because of our trans legislation. He said, this is insane. What are you guys doing? What are they why are they wasting everyone's time on this? And why are they trying to drive people like me away? I am what your state needs. He sees it. He knows it. and he doesn't want to come. And so that, I'm guessing, I mean, that's one anecdote that has to have happened over and over and over again, right? And we see that also with the large events like the NCAA issues. We've seen this in other states, obviously, North Carolina, who have had consequences of making these choices, and absolutely the same thing would happen here. And so, yeah, I'm frustrated too. I feel like there's no quick fix for this. I don't get it. And I think we lose a lot of really bright, amazing young people because of it.
Yeah. I mean, it totally, like, what's interesting looking at a lot of the people in office. I remember, like, when there's, District 24 candidate, the legislative forums, following them the past couple of years and like live tweeting all of them. But like, they're talking about, how we need, families to come here and stay and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, none of them fess up really about like where their kids live. Like, their kids and grandkids aren't in South Dakota. Like, unless there's a farm, like a lot of these people that are in the legislature, like their children left South Dakota. Like, there's this like donut hole. Like, sometimes they'll come back, but like they get the hell out. And then you've got carpetbaggers like me who come in from other states because I'm filling a job that there's nobody in South, like there's not a South Dakota to do, like, because all the those kids have all left. And it's just bonkers. And then Nome having all of her tourism ads and like actively recruiting the conspiracy theorists to come live here. And then they get here and, realize that we have winter and wind and, crumbling infrastructure, because that's what comes with a, red state utopia is we don't invest in people. We don't invest in the state. We apparently just invest in these weird culture war issues that get you bonus points at shitty conventions in Florida. Like, I don't get it.
That we have about 8 minutes left till the hour. I do want to bring up a couple other bills that pertain to that whole culture war thing, and specifically related to some other things related to abortion. And this one just dropped either yesterday or today, but House Bill 1114 would revise the current language about abortions to basically state that it's the termination of human life. So you can go find that bill and see it, but the way the revisions are, it's really, really just not okay.
Who was the prime on that one, Bree? Do you know?
Hansen.
Real quick, I actually have the tab. It's the usual suspects, right? So what was that? 1114?
Which of the usual suspects?
I'm pretty sure it was Representative Hansen from District 25 on that one.
Yeah,
and this is his favorite type of bill. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but all the usual suspects have kind of signed on as co-sponsors. Basically, the bill, it says it was on, looks like it was on Wednesday. So the current language was that abortion would be the use of any means to intentionally terminate pregnancy of a woman known to be pregnant with knowledge that the termination with those means will, with reasonable likelihood, cause the death of the fetus. They want that part scratched out, and it would say abortion, intentional determination of the life of a human being in the uterus. So bad grammar. And also that basically literally saying it's intentional termination of life of a human being in the uterus, which is mostly concerning. Well, it's concerning in a lot of ways. But it's also, I mean, in terms of, and just problematic in terms of that whole like idea, the whole, defining when life begins. But the other piece of this is that this language then sets a precedence for further legislation that would make it a criminal act. And so that to me is what's really alarming about that. And then House Bill 1051, Amanda, you want to talk about that one?
Oh, that's the one where, and this is the fun thing, trying to play memory and remember, like, what are all these bills?
Birth.
That's the Born Alive one.
Yeah, that's the Born. Yes, that's the Born Alive one.
That's the you have a botched. First of all, you have a late term abortion, and it fails, and the and there's a live birth, and then you have to provide medical care for that infant once it's born. So let's just back up a second. It is illegal currently in South Dakota to get a late-term abortion. And just to be clear, when women are, and if you look at all of the data across the country about women getting abortions past, like within like the 30 weeks, it literally is happening because of some massive medical issue that is happening either to the fetus or the mother. And it is not something that's just done because suddenly somebody's like, yeah, I just don't think I want to be pregnant anymore. So the fact to be even just like legislating on this too is just so...
It's heartless.
It is super heartless.
It is.
So, and again, it's like, this is an issue where this is between a pregnant woman and her doctor and her family. Like this is just something that should not even be in the legislation. And what's also kind of troublesome, and I didn't put the bill on here because I forgot what number it was, but there's also then another bill about not that abortions would not be allowed if you knew that the fetus had a risk of having Down syndrome. And then even just if you listen to like, and again, this is not something this is not something that's happening. Because especially also in South Dakota, because by the time you actually know if you are at risk for that or not, it would be past the time when you would even be allowed to get abortion in the first place. Because under rare circumstances, can you even get genetic testing that's going to indicate any of that? And that's only if you have insurance for it, and you have to be of a certain age. So you have to be like considered advanced maternal age to even get your insurance to cover the early genetics testing before week 10. So it's just like all of this is just so, and what was really disgusting about that is Noam, brings this couple on TV. I think he's a former legislator from Minnesota, and his wife and their child with Down syndrome is this like, to just kind of put them on display as part of this bill. And I think, Susan, you're the one that talked about this. Like, it's just this like political pandering and game playing to kind of manipulate people emotionally in really just kind of heartless ways. And it's super frustrating. And then again, finally, then there's another bill, which on the surface looks great. It's basically saying that if you are pregnant and you find out that your fetus has a terminal condition and won't survive once they're born, that you are by law allowed to have access to hospice care and counseling and a bunch of other things, which is amazing. That to me is like, yes, that's wonderful. All those things should be provided, especially in terms of processing postpartum. But it's suspect when there's these other bills at the same time. It's almost kind of like a shit sandwich. Like, we're going to do all these things, but here's this little like, but we'll just like, we're doing this too. And that to me just like.
So obviously all of these bills are trying to create a path toward the overturning of Roe v. Wade, right? Like there's no question there. This isn't even like secret anymore. This is absolutely what they're attempting to do. So where I always, and this is like my number one issue, I care about this so much. But here's what I coming back to is like, put yourself in that room. So like, put yourself in the room with a couple who has just found out that their fetus isn't viable and that there's no possible way that they are going to be able to give birth to not just like an unhealthy baby, but a baby that can be alive. And how hard that is for a couple to hear that. And then to hear, so this is what this in John Hansen's world, this is what he wants. He wants a couple who hears that to be forced to carry that baby to birth, to delivery, whenever that may happen. And then this law also requires that if that baby is alive at all when delivered, they must attempt resuscitation, regardless of whether the doctor knows like that baby is not going to survive or that fetus is like completely non-viable. That the medical team is required to do this while the parents are there. How awful is this? Like, I've been pregnant twice, and it was really stressful and hard. And I gave birth to two super healthy babies. I cannot imagine. I've had friends who have struggled with infertility, who have had to deal with health issues with their children. And I just can't imagine having Fred Deutsch and John Hanson in that room saying, here's what we need to do, on some weird moral high ground that doesn't really like speak to the actual needs of families that they care about or they claim to care about. Sorry, I get real mad about this one. Like,
yeah, well, and that's like what Amanda was saying earlier related to the COVID stuff. Like, you can't claim to be pro-life and everything else and then just kind of take a big dump on people in these totally traumatic situations. And I think that it's like, I mean, I think about that as, you know, also somebody who has been pregnant and given birth to a child who actually was born with birth defects that we didn't know about until she was born. And and you know, we have insurance and it's all working out and it's okay. But I also think about it in terms of it wasn't life-threatening for her. But this whole idea of like, we're going to force you to do this, we're going to force medical team to do it. And then at whose expense, not only emotionally, but also financially, all of those pieces, like what is the toll for that whole process? Like, and what if a family, like, so what if you knew and you made it, I mean, don't parents have the right to kind of, to make it, in essence, to make those like end of life decisions, or to have essentially kind of a do not resuscitate, a living will, whatever, what have you, for this unborn child, basically, because I mean, you'd still have those proxy rights once they're born, you have that proxy right? Like, I have the right to make those medical decisions for my child. And so why wouldn't I have that right in that moment versus any other medical decision? And that's also what's interesting with this whole body integrity thing with Bill Jensen, like, you have the right to make medical decisions for yourself, but not in this case. Like,
yeah, not unless it involves a uterus, then you're fucked. Like,
patriarchy at work.
Yeah, it's just like, so many gray hairs from the last 4 years. Like, Jesus Christ, South Dakota. But yeah, we're at an hour, so we should probably stop, because literally we could go on all night. Session is short, it is fast, there is no end of bills. We've got, you know, some information in the comments here as far as links to the Transformation Project, to LEAD, to the petition for the mask requirements. Check out the South Dakota LRC website. That is where you can keep track of all of the bills, find, you know, what committee, the contact information, all of that stuff. That is like one of the most important websites during session. Susan, thank you so much for joining us. Any closing comments? Anything you want to plug last minute?
No, big plug for the petition. Please sign it. Just keep fighting the good fight. These actions matter. When orgs are asking you to sign on to issues, it's because they really need the help in South Dakota. So listen, I know it's tiring, but keep doing the work, please. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. And just to piggyback on that, the recent we put in the comments, we have the link to the LRC website. Also, you can just Google South Dakota LRC and find it. You can create your own personalized account, basically, to kind of monitor issues that you're concerned about or bills that you're interested in. And I just added the link again to the petition for Senate Bill 125, which is pertaining to masks in South Dakota to help us fight COVID. And yeah, I mean, all of these legislators doing these things that they do year after year, they do it because they think they can get away with it because people just get complacent and don't speak up. And I'm gonna just close with something that Amanda has been consistently reminding people of on Facebook lately. If you are a registered Republican in South Dakota and you do not agree with these issues, but you're registered Republican because you like to vote in the primary, I don't know what that's all about. Or maybe you're worried about job security, let's be honest, because that is a thing here in South Dakota. You need to stand up, because a Republican telling a Republican to shut the fuck up about anti-transgender legislation, and I don't care about not filtering my language at this point, carries a lot more weight than some crazy liberal from the left coast who just moved here and doesn't belong here talking about this issue. So just, like, if you've got, and that goes along also, if you've got, the whole like South Dakota pedigree, and you can talk about how your family's been here for a bazillion generations when you first moved here as white settlers, then you need to speak up, because that's how this changes. And with that, we will say
Awesome.